I knew something was wrong the moment I saw the look on my brother Adam's face. He wasn't grieving, not the way I was. Our father had just passed away 3 days ago, and while I was still waking up each morning with a lump in my throat and tears crusted to my lashes, Adam looked relieved. It was subtle, barely there, but I saw it. That small smirk he gave when he thought no one was looking, like a weight had been lifted. I should have listened to my gut right then. But grief does strange things. It fogs your vision. It convinces you that the people you've known all your life are incapable of hurting you. That morning, I was standing in the living room of my childhood home. The same living room where Dad taught me how to tie my shoes. Where we built blanket forts and watched old movies. Everything looked the same, but felt completely different now. The air was heavier and colder. My sister Natalie was fiddling with her phone, pretending not to notice me. That wasn't like her. We'd always been close, or so I thought. But she hadn't looked me in the eyes once since the funeral. I tried to shake the feeling. Maybe she was just hurting in her own way. Maybe we all were. But then the lawyer arrived. He was a man in his early 60s, sharply dressed, with a steel-gray beard and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. Mr. Callahan. He carried a black briefcase, which he placed carefully on the coffee table. "We'll begin the reading of your father's will shortly," he said, his voice calm and professional. "I'll need all immediate family members present." I nodded. "That's me, Natalie, and Adam." He gave me a glance, quick, unreadable. "Yes, of course." We all sat down. The couch felt hard beneath me, the cushions sunken and lopsided from years of use. I sat between my siblings, but it felt like there were miles between us. Something had changed, and I didn't know what. Yet. The reading began with the formalities. Dates. Legal terminology. My father's name and the standard language about being of sound mind. I was barely listening. My heart pounded in my chest, waiting for the part where he mentioned me, his daughter. His only daughter. And then it came. "To my son, Adam Carter, I leave the family estate, including the house and surrounding land." My head snapped toward Adam. He was staring straight ahead, jaw clenched. "To my daughter, Natalie Carter, I leave the trust account in its entirety, to be released upon the date of this reading." Natalie didn't move. Her face was blank, frozen. I leaned forward, my hands trembling. "To my daughter, Emily Carter." Here it was. My name. I held my breath. "I leave my love and my hope that she will find happiness, wherever life may take her." Silence. Just silence. I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Mr. Callahan cleared his throat. "That's what's written in the will, Miss Carter." I laughed. I actually laughed. A short, stunned sound that cracked like glass. "No. That's not possible. My father, he wouldn't do that. He wouldn't leave me nothing." Natalie finally looked at me, and I wish she hadn't. Her eyes held no warmth, no remorse, just pity. Or maybe satisfaction. I couldn't tell anymore. Adam stood up. "You heard what the will said." I stood too, shaking now. "No. There must be a mistake. A second page. An addendum. Something." "There's no mistake," Natalie said softly. "Dad changed the will months ago. Before everything." "Before what?" I snapped. Adam turned to me. "Before you started drifting away. Before you made your choices." "What choices?" My voice cracked, rising. "I stayed. I took care of him while he was sick." "Where were you two?" They didn't answer. And then it hit me, like a punch in the stomach. They'd planned this. They'd waited. Watched. Manipulated. And while I was holding our father's hand in the hospital, reading to him every night, they were making sure I'd be erased. A noise rang in my ears. Buzzing, high-pitched. I was dizzy. The room tilted for a moment. I couldn't breathe. Mr. Callahan was still talking, but I wasn't listening anymore. My world had just been stolen from me. The house, the memories, the safety gone. And, worse, the people I'd trusted most had taken it. I didn't go home that night. I drove around the city in silence, letting the numbness take over. The streets were mostly empty. It was raining. Of course it was. The kind of cold drizzle that creeps into your bones and makes everything feel heavier than it should. My phone buzzed twice. Natalie. Then Adam. I didn't answer. I pulled into a cheap motel on the edge of town. The kind of place that smelled like old coffee and bleach. I didn't care. I needed space to breathe. To think.
To stop my mind from spinning.
How had I not seen this coming? I kept replaying every recent moment in my head.
Dad's decline.
The hushed conversations between my siblings when they thought I wasn't listening. The way Natalie started showing up more often near the end, not to help but to be seen helping. And Adam, who'd barely visited for months, suddenly hovering around Dad with forced affection. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stared at the ceiling of the motel room, eyes wide open in the dark. There had to be more to this. Something wasn't right. It wasn't just about money. This was personal. They didn't just want me out of the will, they wanted me erased. As if I'd never been part of this family. The next morning, I drove to Dad's lawyer's office without calling. Mr. Callahan looked surprised to see me, but he was polite. I need to see the original will, I said, not bothering with small talk. He blinked behind his glasses. Ms. Carter, the copy I read yesterday was the official, signed version. Then I want to see every version before that. My father had a will drafted 5 years ago. I was there. He named me the executor. What happened to that will? He hesitated. I leaned in. I'm not leaving until you show me. He gave a long sigh and disappeared into the back room. Minutes later, he returned with a folder. Inside were several documents, legal drafts, emails, notes. And just like I remembered, the older version of the will was there. My name was on everything. The house, the savings, even the antique bookstore Dad and I had talked about reopening together. What made him change it? I asked. Callahan shifted uncomfortably. There were discussions. Your siblings brought up concerns. Concerns? Statements regarding your absence, your financial instability, your alleged desire to sell the family property. Your father was influenced. My blood boiled. Those were lies. I'm not saying they were true. I'm saying your father changed his mind. At least, that's what the documentation suggests. My mind raced. Were there witnesses when the updated will was signed? He nodded. A neighbor and a nurse from the hospice team. Something about that didn't sit right. I knew all of Dad's nurses. One of them, Clara, had become like family. She used to bring him soup and sit with me during those long nights. I left the office without another word and drove straight to Clara's home. When she opened the door and saw me, her face softened. Emily, I was so sorry to hear about your dad. I hugged her, then pulled back. Clara, can I ask you something? Were you present when my father signed a new will? She frowned.
No.
I was told he'd already finalized it. I blinked. You weren't a witness? She shook her head.
No.
Adam said he'd handle it. Brought in some woman I didn't know to help with paperwork. That was it. My heart dropped. Can you describe the woman? I asked. Blonde, maybe mid-30s. Dressed professionally. Definitely not one of our nurses. And now I knew. They'd found someone to pretend to be a witness. Or maybe even forged it entirely. This wasn't just betrayal. It was fraud. The walls of silence and confusion were starting to crack, and I wasn't going to stop now. I went back to the motel and started compiling everything: photos, text messages, emails, handwritten notes Dad had left for me. I remembered an old video I'd taken of him 6 months before he passed, where he clearly said, "If anything happens to me, Emily, the house is yours. You always took care of it." It wasn't legally binding, but it was something. I posted a message in a local legal forum, asking for advice anonymously. Within hours, a reply came from someone named Daniel, an estate lawyer who'd handled similar cases. He agreed to meet me the next day. When I explained everything, Daniel nodded slowly, flipping through my printouts. "This isn't just suspicious," he said. "It's potentially criminal.
Forgery.
Coercion. Possibly elder abuse." The words made my skin crawl. "I want to fight," I said firmly. "I don't care how long it takes." He gave me a grim smile. Then let's start by freezing the assets, before they sell off what's left. I left his office with a fire in my chest. They thought I'd stay quiet. They thought I'd fold. They were wrong. It was a Tuesday morning when everything shifted. Daniel called me just after 8 a.m., his voice low and urgent. Emily, I got the confirmation. The signature on the new will. It's not your father's. I froze in place. Are you serious? We ran a forensic handwriting analysis. Compared it to checks your father signed, letters he wrote you, and the original will. It's a forgery. My knees gave out, and I sank onto the edge of the motel bed. My heart was pounding in my ears. Adam forged the will? I whispered. We can't say for certain it was him, Daniel replied. But whoever submitted this document committed fraud. And if we prove they benefited from it, like by receiving property or cash, it becomes a felony. Everything felt surreal. I had felt the betrayal. I had suspected the manipulation. But now I had proof. And somehow, that made it even worse. I looked around the cluttered motel room. Papers everywhere, legal folders, highlighters, empty coffee cups. This mess was my life now. But finally, I had something real. Tangible. I called Clara immediately. Would you be willing to testify? I asked. That you weren't present for the will signing? Yes, she said without hesitation. Your father trusted you. It was obvious. He wouldn't have done that to you. That afternoon, Daniel filed an emergency petition in probate court to pause all transfers of assets from the estate. We attached our evidence and requested an investigation. The judge granted the freeze pending a hearing. It felt like a victory. But the war was far from over. 3 days later, Adam showed up at my motel. I was outside grabbing takeout when his car rolled into the lot. I didn't recognize it at first. It was a black SUV, newer than anything he used to drive. He stepped out and walked toward me like he owned the world. What are you doing here? I asked, my hands tightening around the paper bag. I came to talk, he said. Privately. I didn't answer. I just stared. He laughed. You're really doing all this? Freezing accounts? Lawyers? You can't win, Emily. You're wasting your time. I said nothing. You don't understand what Dad wanted, he continued. He was trying to protect us. You're emotional. You make bad choices. You always have. The audacity of it made my skin crawl. You stole everything, I said quietly. And now you're here gaslighting me like I'm the problem? His jaw twitched. We did what we had to do. You would have sold the house. You would have buried us all in your debt. I took a step forward. I was the only one there when he got sick. I changed his sheets, cleaned his vomit, sat by his side every night. You visited once a month for an hour. And now you're standing here pretending you know what he wanted. You were the favorite, he spat. Always were. We were just cleaning up after the damage you didn't even notice you caused. I narrowed my eyes. So you forged a will? Lied? Made me think my own father disowned me. He blinked. Just a second. A flicker of guilt. Or fear. Then it vanished. You won't win this, Emily. Lawyers don't scare me. But something told me he was bluffing. Later that night, I went through my laptop, reviewing the messages Dad had sent me in his final weeks. Buried deep in one email chain was something I hadn't noticed before, an attached scanned letter. It was dated 3 weeks before his passing. Dear Emily, if anything happens and you get nothing, I want you to know it wasn't my decision. Things have gotten complicated. Adam and Natalie are pushing me, saying things that don't feel right. I'm tired, Em. Too tired to fight back. But you've always been my strength. I love you. You are my legacy, no matter what paper says. Dad. I cried. For the first time since the funeral, I really cried. Not out of frustration or confusion, but grief. Deep, shattering grief for the man I'd lost and the love that never left me. This letter was gold. It didn't override a forged will legally, but it painted a picture. It proved coercion, and it could destroy their credibility in court. I printed a copy and handed it to Daniel the next morning. He read it slowly, then looked at me with a strange intensity. This changes everything. We're going to subpoena the notary next. If we prove the signing never took place properly, the will becomes invalid. As I left the office, Natalie called me. I hesitated, but answered. "Why are you doing this?" she said, her voice tight. "You mean why am I not letting you steal what's mine?" "We didn't want to hurt you." I laughed bitterly. "Then you shouldn't have buried me alive." Silence. "You'll regret this," she said softly. "We were just trying to survive." And then the call ended. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling again, but it didn't feel like the same ceiling. Something had cracked open. I was no longer questioning what had happened. I was preparing for what would happen next. The court hearing was set for Friday morning. It felt like a countdown to war. Every day that led up to it was thick with anxiety and anticipation. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My hands shook every time I opened my inbox, expecting a last-minute motion or some aggressive threat from Adam's lawyer. But nothing came. Just silence. Daniel, calm and methodical, was preparing everything. Witness testimonies. The forensic handwriting report. Dad's letter. Clara's sworn affidavit that she was not present at the supposed will signing. It was all coming together. And still, I couldn't breathe. The night before the hearing, I sat alone in the motel room, staring at a childhood photo of me and Dad. I was on his shoulders, laughing. The sky behind us was bright blue. I remember that day. He bought me a book from a dusty old shop, told me one day we'd open one just like it. I made a silent promise to him that night. I would not let them erase me. Friday came fast. The courtroom was quiet when I walked in. Almost too quiet. Adam sat on the right side with a smug expression, dressed in an expensive tailored suit that screamed, "I've already won." Natalie sat next to him, her face unreadable, but her eyes darted nervously every time I glanced her way. Daniel leaned in to whisper, "Stick to the truth. You don't need to dramatize anything. The facts will destroy them." The judge, an older woman with piercing eyes and a sharp tone, entered and signaled the start. My heart thundered in my chest. Adam's lawyer went first.
Calm. Polished.
She painted a picture of me as reckless, financially unstable, and emotionally unfit to manage an estate. She claimed the will change was voluntary, that my father had full mental clarity, and that he had every right to shift his assets to his other children. I didn't flinch, but inside I was burning. When it was our turn, Daniel stood and took the floor with quiet power. He began with the forensic report. "Your Honor, the signature on the revised will does not match the known, verified handwriting of Mr. Gerald Carter. In fact, the forensic specialist concluded, with 98% certainty, that the signature was forged." Gasps whispered through the room. The judge raised an eyebrow. Then came Clara's testimony via video. She clearly stated she was never present during any will signing and that the supposed witness was a woman she'd never seen before. We followed with the letter from Dad. His words hung heavy in the room. "They are pushing me, too tired to fight. You are my legacy." The judge asked questions. Daniel answered them with precision. I felt hope creeping into my veins like warm light. Then Adam was called to testify. He walked to the stand confidently. For the first few questions, he kept his cool. Denied everything. Said the lawyer handled everything. Claimed Dad was completely lucid and wanted to do the right thing. But then Daniel leaned in. "Adam, can you confirm the identity of the witness listed as a hospice nurse on the will?" "Yes." "You met her personally?" "Yes." "Do you know her name?"
Pause.
His face twitched. It was, "I don't remember." "You don't remember the name of someone who signed as a legal witness to your father's final will?" It was all arranged by the notary." "Who was?" Silence. Daniel turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we've contacted the notary listed. She has no recollection of attending any session for Mr. Gerald Carter. No records exist." The courtroom fell dead silent. Adam shifted uncomfortably. Then the judge spoke. "Mr. Carter, forging a legal document and providing false witnesses is a serious offense. You're aware of that, correct?" He looked at his lawyer. She avoided his eyes. Natalie buried her face in her hands. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. But then I remembered the months I spent alone by Dad's side. The funeral they made me feel unwelcome at. The gaslighting. The lies. I was done being quiet. Daniel asked the judge to declare the revised will void due to fraud and reinstate the previous version, naming me the primary heir and executor. He also requested a criminal investigation into the forged will and its participants. The judge took a deep breath. I am granting a full review of the estate and ordering a temporary reinstatement of the prior will until the investigation concludes. Any distribution of assets under the revised document is hereby frozen. Adam stood up suddenly. This is insane. She doesn't deserve anything. The judge slammed her gavel. Sit down, Mr. Carter. Security moved closer. And in that moment, everything turned. Adam realized it was over. Natalie burst into tears. I told him it was wrong. I didn't want to. He turned on her. Shut up. The courtroom erupted in tension. The bailiff stepped in. And I just sat there. Still. Steady. Finally seen. The years of being the emotional one, the unstable one, the invisible daughter, gone.
They tried to bury me.
But I wasn't the one sinking now. The case made the local papers within a week. Daughter exposes forged will in inheritance battle. One headline read. Court freezes assets pending criminal probe, said another. But none of that mattered to me. What mattered was sitting on my father's porch again, with the wind whispering through the trees and the creak of the rocking chair beneath me. The house had been returned to the estate under my temporary control. It wasn't official yet, paperwork still pending, investigations still unfolding, but I had the keys, and with them came a breath of peace. I wandered through the rooms the next morning, every corner echoing memories. The smell of old books in the study, the sound of my father humming in the kitchen, the creaky floorboard by the hallway closet. It felt like he was still here, not as a ghost but as an anchor. The funeral photo still sat on the mantel. I picked it up and stared into his eyes. Thank you, I whispered, for trusting me, even when you didn't have the strength to fight. It would take weeks, maybe months, to finish everything. But the judge had reinstated the original will, and the balance of power had shifted. The tide was mine now. Adam was facing charges.
Forgery. Fraud. Perjury.
Natalie had agreed to testify in exchange for leniency. She confessed everything to the investigators. The fake witness, the forged signature, the way Adam had pushed her into silence. He said Emily wouldn't fight back, she told them. He thought she was too broken. But I wasn't. I was bent, yes, scarred in places no one could see, but I was never broken. After the news broke, I started receiving messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Old family friends. Distant relatives. Even Clara came to visit me, bringing over a homemade pie and a tight, motherly hug. You did what no one else had the courage to do, she said softly. You didn't just fight for yourself. You fought for the truth. But it wasn't about justice anymore. Not entirely. It was about healing something inside me that had been bleeding for years. The betrayal wasn't just about the inheritance, it was about being made invisible, about being erased, replaced, ignored by the people who should have stood beside me. That wound wouldn't heal overnight. But for the first time, it was healing. A few days later, I received an unmarked envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a folded note and a flash drive. I hesitated, then plugged it into my laptop. The folder was named Confession.
My heart jumped.
It was a video. Adam, sitting alone in what looked like his apartment. He looked thinner.
Drained.
Like someone who had lost more than just a legal battle. He stared into the camera for several seconds before speaking. If you're watching this, Emily, then I guess everything's come out.
I don't even know where to start.
You probably hate me. You should. I didn't just take your inheritance. I tried to erase you. Because I was jealous. Always was. You had something I never had. Dad's love. His belief in you. And I couldn't stand it. So I told myself you didn't deserve it. I convinced myself you were weak.
Broken.
And that if I just took it all, it would finally silence the voice inside me that said, "You'll never be enough." But it didn't. It only made it louder. You won, Emily. Not just in court. You won because you never lost who you were. And even though I can't take back what I did, maybe this is the start of me trying to face it. The video ended there. No apology. But it didn't matter. He didn't need to say sorry. I already knew the truth, and that was enough. I sat there in silence for a long time, watching the screen go dark. Later that night, I took the flash drive outside and tossed it into the fire pit. The flames devoured it quickly.
No need to keep it.
I didn't need his guilt to validate my pain. The next morning, I returned to my father's study and opened the locked bottom drawer of his desk. Inside were dozens of old notebooks, his journals. One of them was marked with my name. I opened it. Emily reminds me of fire. Not just because she's fierce, but because she gives warmth, even when she's hurting. She makes broken things feel whole again. She sees people for who they are, not what they've done. I hope she never forgets who she is. The world might try to steal it from her, but it's hers. Always. I closed the book, tears falling silently down my cheeks. This was the real inheritance. His words, his love, his belief in me. Things Adam could never steal. That night, I walked through the house one last time before locking up. I stood in the hallway, where Dad had once hung a family photo. There was a new photo now. Just me and him.
On that sunny day.
My laugh frozen in time. His hand steady on my shoulder. I smiled. And just as I turned off the light, I heard it. The faintest creak. From the floorboard in the hall. I paused. No one's here, I whispered to myself. But the sound echoed again, just once, then silence. I stood still, listening. Nothing. I shook my head and smiled faintly. Maybe it was the wind. Or maybe he never really left.